But you've had an interestingly mixed career. You could, at the beginning, have gone directly down the classical route and played all of those Shakespearean roles, but you've been able to do a huge variety.
I was very lucky and also very ignorant because I had absolutely no idea when I went into and got the Avengers what an impact it would have on my life. I hadn't seen much television. I'd only ever seen television with my parents. So when I took the job, it was a leap in the dark. And I was criticised for it by people like Peter Hall, who said she's wasting herself and all that kind of stuff.
He'd been your director of the RSC, yeah.
But in actual fact, it worked out wonderfully well.
Victorian?
I hardly think they'd be amused.
No, perhaps not. And women then, well, they lacked your independence.
I'm thoroughly emancipated.
Does Elizabethan appeal to you?
Not at all. The men were so tiny.
The first thing I did when I stopped doing the Avengers was to go back to the Royal Shakespeare and say, thank you, now I can sell tickets, which I couldn't before. And it was my way of acknowledging where I had been nurtured.
And that question of that range, because people will mention in the Avengers and on Her Majesty's Secret Service, do you regret the shadow of those roles?
No, at all. I have to acknowledge what I owe them. And I do acknowledge it. You know, when I leave the theatre now, around the stage door, and, you know, we're surrounded by people wanting, and 9 times out of 10, it's a photograph of the Avengers or it's a photograph of the Bond film. And I acknowledge my debt to those, the film and the series. It allowed me to do all sorts of other things.
And as you know, there are some actresses who later on in their careers, as they've got older, retrospectively, they've had feminist concerns about some of the roles they played earlier and some of the things they did and some of the publicity and the legs and the breasts and so on. But have you ever felt concern about the Avengers?
Absolutely not. I mean, the feminists actually approached me in the 60s, you know, to be one of their spokeswomen. And it always seemed to me that the issue is quite simple. Within yourself, you are an individual and you are free. You are a free individual. The only fetters that the feminists have are the economic fetters. And once we have parity with men, which we do in my profession, I've got no gripe at all. And economic independence is what they were about, without actually recognising it. They went on to kind of, chop the cojones off men, which is utterly ridiculous.
But the other area that they went into, as you know, is this word objectification, the idea of being a sex object for men. I mean, Emma Peel, I suppose some would say that was, but you never worried about that?
I have to be honest, it discomforted me because I never saw myself as sexy. There you go. So I wasn't entirely happy, but I didn't see it as a feminist issue. I saw it as a, if you like, a kind of, I think perhaps I fell short in that respect because I couldn't deliver. I did the sexy photographs because it was asked of me, but I never did the sexy in person, ever, ever, ever.
Have you ever worried over the years, because there are many stories of actresses getting quite worrying mail from men, I mean, creepy or worse than that. Have you had that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did, along with a lot of other ladies, mature ladies. And it turned out to be some pathetic creature in Manchester who's, I don't know, some bachelor or something. And he used to send really filthy things to me. And I think Nairi Dawn Porter, various other people suffered. But I could always tell because he had this weird habit of circling, you know, the dot above an eye, and he'd circle it. So that was spooky. And as soon as I saw that, I stopped opening them.
Well, you had the great advantage of having some eyes in your name. I suppose actresses who didn't, they wouldn't have been able to work it out
right.
the same way. I mean, two eyes would be very useful. But in general, fans have been, I mean, they've stayed within the right limits.
Oh, absolutely. I have no stalking problems. Now I don't. When I was doing Phaedra at the National, and this Dutchman who had a thing about me bought tickets for 6 nights in a row to see Phaedra. He didn't speak a word of English, and he decided that the play was a comedy. He sat there laughing throughout. And of course, it was very upsetting because there was I trying to be dead serious and tragedian and all that. And eventually they had to kick him out and pay him back his money. But that was a fan gone wrong.
That's amazing. So you were playing one of the great tragedies of all time to a single laughing Dutchman.
Patients unmoved. No marvel though she paused. They can be meek that have no other cause. A wretched soul bruised with adversity, we bid be quiet when we hear it cry. But were we burdened with like weight of pain, as much or more we should ourselves complain. So thou that hast no unkind mate to grieve thee, with urging helpless patience would relieve me.
Having become established with the RSC, you did some television roles, and that led to the Avengers. The approach for that come about?
I was just nominated to audition along with half, if not 3/4, of the young actresses in London, yes. And I went along and they said dress, black trousers, black polo neck and everything. And then they put you in the dressing room and they keep you there for half a day while it was just awful. And then, anyway, I did it. And Patrick, I remember, was absolutely charming. Patrick McNee, yeah. And then I got it, much to my surprise, because I'd sort of thought, well, I'd just go along for the experience, really.
And it was slightly unusual because the Avengers already existed, didn't it? And this was a new role.
Well, it was. There'd been two other people. It was a man originally, and then they didn't change the script, which is why she was as accomplished as she was. Oh, it was no. They now pretend they know what they were doing, but they didn't. Absolutely not.
This is really interesting because, well, you allude to it there, but there are all these articles and books saying that she was a proto-feminist and a strong woman, but the part had been written for a man.
Exactly. Yeah.
And did you have an easy sense of what you were going to do with the role? Did she come easily to you?
Yes. Well, particularly Patrick was very kind, and that mattered, that we clicked, we got on. We had a sort of same sense of humour, and so he was instrumental in my easing myself into that part and very quickly feeling at home in it. Because Pat and I quite often would write our own lines. They were very kind and let us sort of improvise and stuff like, just to keep it fresh.
How'd you fare at the Bureau?
They took me on, but they seemed more interested in my competitors, so I produced one.
Who?
You. We're in the travel business. I provide luxurious igloos in Iceland.
Complete with a deep freeze.
Bearskin rice.
And hot and cold running Eskimos.
Why not? That's quite an idea.
And where do I operate?
From your flat.
Very convenient. But if you want my opinion...
I'd love it, but we have to observe the priorities.
And it's hard now to imagine for a lot of people, younger people, what a big TV hit was at that time.
Yeah.
Because there were only 2 channels, weren't there? Therefore, it was, if something took off, most of the country was watching it.
It was huge, yes. And also, the fan mail started pouring in. Well, I didn't have a secretary. I didn't have photographs. I didn't have anything. Nobody told me or helped me, except my mum. I used to arrive at my mother's house and, with all these things. I eventually got photographs and for the first, until the end of the series, it was my mother who did the fan mail. So there are hundreds of photographs out there signed by my mother. And she used to answer the mail and, there'd be sort of impassioned young men and my mother would write back and say, what you need is a good run round the block. And my daughter's far too old for you and stuff like that.